Welcome to the Wisdom Window on Strong Island Radio. The Wisdom Window is your portal to timeless knowledge and understanding. Join us each episode as Maddi Cheers and Marianne Franzese examine ancient and current wisdom traditions and apply these teachings to today's unique challenges. So let's get started and welcome your hosts, Maddi and Marianne.
Hello and welcome to the Wisdom Window. I'm Maddi Cheers and I'm here with my co-host, Marianne Franzese. Hi, Mare.
Hi, Maddi.
And we are here with our special guest, Lori Cordova. So, Marianne, you want to give us some intro into what we're going to look at today?
Well, sure. We started the conversation last week with Lori and just began to really touch on the possibility to glean some wisdom out of this void of grief. And today we're moving forward with the idea of how grief begins to change relationship. First with we have and develop a relationship with grief itself, because grief is a long process. But then it also held the potential to change the relationship with ourselves, with others, and within a community. And that's a certain awareness that someone who is in the grieving process can begin to and look at. So we're interested in hearing your perspective on all of that, Lori, the idea of grief and relationship.
Hi, thanks for having me back, you two. So in terms of relationship, just to get right into it, there's always that potential in many circumstances for, I guess, kind of like that circle of light to go around situations, particularly grief. But the key word in it is growth. So without this, the grief is just this, it can become this grief, a brief, troublesome time, maybe a little ember of hope, and then we move on back to just normal life as we knew it before.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that can happen is not just moving back to normal life. I'm just going to quickly relate a story of a friend of mine who I no longer see, because she fell into so much grief and confusion over the death of her father. Her father died a year after retiring, and his whole life he had looked forward to retiring. He hated his job. He did it so that he could save money, have his boat, and retire and spend his remaining years fishing. And then he died 1 year later. And it so threw her for a loop that she kind of went crazy. I mean, for a while, she wouldn't come out of the house. She wouldn't drive farther than a couple of miles from her house when she did start to drive again. And it destroyed her marriage. She took out all of her anger on her husband and completely cut him out of his relationship with their two sons, so that she was like in charge of them, and anything he said or wanted to do with them was just not important. And she ended up, like I said, she completely ended her marriage. She destroyed the relationship between her sons and her father and their father. They'd never see him anymore. And their father's a dear, sweet friend of mine. And he is a wonderful, wonderful man. I mean, I'm not making that up just because he's a friend. He is. And they had a wonderful marriage. We knew them for years. We knew the boys growing up. But that grief, that unresolved grief, destroyed everything.
That's, to me, very sensible that it would happen. You guys hear me say a lot of like the order of things, and I'm not in a place to say this is the formula for dealing with grief, because we're all waiting and watching where I land. we could revisit this in a couple of years and see. We don't know how I'm going to make it, but where I'm at now is all I can say. And I mean, and also as a human, this is not my first loss. I don't know if you knew this, Maddi. This is the second child I've lost.
Oh my gosh. No, I didn't.
And prior to this, we all, that's one commonality we have, is loss. So I've lost my mom and a sister, just a couple years, I think, maybe a year before I started Spark with Marianne. And I think you met me, Marianne, while I was grieving that. That was very tough for me. My sister, the way that I defined her was my greatest ally in life. And you guys can imagine what that means as women, right? When you have that ally.
Yeah.
But so what I understand, and a lot of it, I do think what we think about death and how we grieve and what we do with it has a whole lot to do with what we think about life before this even arises. Yeah. So a lot of times I think we're seeing play out what we've already held, right? It just hasn't been, we haven't been called out on it. It hasn't been tested. And then things like this happen and we're put in this spot. The one thing I know about any tough situation in life, especially the worst situations, is that we're called to change, not adapt, and not because adapt to me always implies some type of compromise, and that can seem brave, like nowadays it's very popular where you hear this stoicism, right? Where we just accept these things. And to me, it's somewhat right. And it's good secular advice, but I don't find it whole in that it's all.
Oh, Laurie, we lost your sound for a second there. Can you repeat that last sentence?
To me, one moment. I don't know what I've done here.
No, you're good. You're good. You're fine. Mute for a second.
I can hear you now.
Okay. I have you guys for some reason on the earpiece instead of, like, I'm not hearing on the speaker. Sorry about that. But so what happens is we resign ourselves to certain things in life. And as a person very proud of my humanity, I don't much care for resignation to life. I like to be right there with life, and I like to believe that we are made to be in participation with life and equal to all life. That's just the way we're made for this higher form of actualization. And so that calls for more than like a resignation. And I spoke of acceptance, but what I mean is acceptance of who we are in the order of things, not acceptance of what just is and is not and resigned and a giving up, but a surrender to something better. And to surrender to something better, then you go right to work in that. So in action. When it comes to grief, you either change and transform and you're made new. Okay, so as opposed to different, or your soul crumbles, it's just crushed by grief. And the saddest part about grief isn't the pain and all these horrible feelings, it's that we get lost to it sometimes. We're crushed beneath it. That's tragic. Grief is not tragic, it's horrible and it's hard.
Right.
But tragedy is when we're crushed by it, and things end like that. Because grief should point to something good, as all things in life. As hard as it is to believe that, I do hold it. And the thing is, we can't transform and try to become something more. It starts with an individual, and then, of course, goes to what we were talking about last time, a community. It can be prompted by a community to begin with. But, pardon me?
No, I was just agreeing with you. I mean, I was looking into, before we started this, I was reading all about these various death rituals that different societies have. And in indigenous societies, a lot of these rituals remain. They are still here. In indigenous societies, a lot of rites of passage still exist. So all these rites of passage that you experience going through your life are death and rebirth. So you have a relationship with this. When you're a boy or a girl going into womanhood or manhood, there's a ritual that you go through that where the community is watching you, honoring you, understanding and allowing you to understand that you are now going to become an adult, but you're leaving your childhood behind. You're grieving that. And then every passage of a lifetime is marked. And you understand that in every passage there is loss, but there's also rebirth. So that when you get to the final passage, the community, depending on what the ritual is real. They're really the ones that are sad and brought through the ritual because you're gone. So everybody is acknowledging that grief and helping each other through that grief. Otherwise, they don't make it. And I was reading about when I was reading about the Tibetan Book of the Dead, they don't, and the Tibetan rituals, they only,
okay,
are you hearing me?
Mm-hmm.
They only allow people present who are in a good state of mind. So during the prayers that happen after the death of the person, and even right before, if you're crying and grieving too much, you have to leave, because they want to make sure that the person goes on in a good way. So there's all these different views of how best to deal with death and grief. But what we've lost in our culture is any sense of ritual. And because we don't have these rituals that draw us together as a society, we as friends often have to recreate them for each other, because we're in pockets. Like those of us who might be in certain religions have rituals that go along the way. Those of us who practice certain spiritualities have that. But as a whole community, we don't have that unless we actively recreate it, is my view right now. I think we're in a place where we actively have to recreate rituals where we invite in the whole community so that the person suffering has the support.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. It's funny because right before I had sat down, this takes me to the end of my notes. I sat for about 30 minutes before we spoke. And at the end of my notes, which is kind of my punchline with community, right? But so I was thinking, like, I always ask, so what? So what? So how does this happen? And how do we maintain it? And one of the things that just kind of came upon me, and then I'll go back to from the beginning up to this point, but I'll just take you to this point because of what you said. And that's that for me, I have a lot of confidence in humanity and right where we're at. And part of it is because I know a Maddi Cheers, I know a Marianne. And to me, you guys are both storytellers. And to me, this is the memory of all communities. So I don't fear that that's going to get lost. What can get lost is our ability to maybe listen to the memory, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what we have to, other people that are naturally, I guess, inclined to roles that encourage that have got to be as active as the people. You guys are telling stories all the time. I didn't realize it until I stumbled upon it. But so there needs to be somebody that's making this aware. How did I approach close to 50 years before I was aware of this was going on, right?
Right.
So it's and what am I going to do with it now that I do know? And so we have to, there's storytellers, but there's also people that just need to pass along, hey, just as you would any good phone number of a counselor, somebody to talk to, a good doctor, you got a bad toenail, let me get you a number. We have to normalize, like, oh, this is a memory issue. I know a storyteller.
Right.
That has held how we do this. We don't have to reinvent it. You're not alone. Guess what? Big secret that I'm ready to let out. People have died for ages. We know how to do it. We know how to well.
Yep.
And that's so consoling, right? Just to know
Mhm.
what? Because when it happened, the first thing that happened to me was isolation. I'm all alone, only me. This is the worst. I'm unique in my suffering.
Mm.
I'm not. And part of that, that we have to kind of accept is letting go of this thing. You know, as much as I say I have a lot of confidence and I love our society because of just because we have so many different types of people. But one of the things that I do think that we're prone to in our society is that we do not like the feeling of loss of what we perceive to be control, self-control. And the only way we transform is to let go of some of that need for self-control, even because I want to heal, but I also want to have my own mark on my healing. And so there's this pride of heart, even in the worst situations, but you get to extreme grief. And one of the things that happens is there's no denying I lost control. I could not save my son. What happened against my will, against what I wished and longed for most. And so, and it's funny because even while I was making notes, one of the words that recurs is marked, as you had just said, Maddi. So in that moment of me being in total loss of control, I'm marked that that's happened. And the thing is, grief is sobering because you lose that and you get a chance to just take a look out at everything without yourself in the way. Because you're not demanding that you be even the vision you need to heal. So being in that ultimate grief, it's also clear where people understand that you're in that spot where you're a little out of control and you are marked and they are going to watch. So how does this unfold? What happens now? Well, they could come in and want to, I guess, console. But what you now have to realize, and this is something glorious that I've realized, is that when I say mark, I'm a mark of what? I'm a mark of wisdom. Guess what? This also implies I don't have to be wise to be a mark of wisdom. And we have got to start giving each other this credit. Or else we run the risk of saying that, being very Gnostic. People that seem intelligent run the show. Right now, I'm absolutely a mark of wisdom without actually being filled with personal wisdom. I'm still journeying. I admitted last time, no, I don't have it. I reject it a lot. I'm a stubborn girl. But this I do know. So now, this simple mark of wisdom, it stands for others, and it calls for them also to kind of adjust their reality. So the first thing, one of the things that happens is last time I spoke a little bit about disordered reason, okay? And we commonly like to find, I guess, the means in life, inside and outside of grief, that those means are for our own advantage, right? A lot of what we seek in life is our own advantage. And not now. There's no advantage to be had in grief for me. For people on the outside looking in, there will be this sense of wanting to console the grieving person. And there's different types of consolation. Not to take anything away from anybody or judge it, there just is. And if it's my judgment, so be it. I'm here, I get to. And that's that some people will try to console to comfort themselves. Right. That's okay. No shame in that, because I'm very much a person that is come as you are. That's okay. You're just, that's where you are. Now I know it. And there's an honesty in that, unless they don't realize that. But the other thing is to realize that true suffering or consolation of suffering is sufferable itself. And this, I'm going to try to keep my voice stronger than last time and a little more clear than last time. This I learned from Marianne in a horrific way, as grievous. And this is her mark so far in the journey. And that's that for her to come and console me has only meant next to me, on the side of me, and suffering alongside. She is in a sufferable spot because you know what? She can't heal me. And this requires a really high level of like self-acceptance on her part. First of all, Marianne is kind of a healer.
Oh, thanks.
She had to let even that go. You don't get to bring that with you, Marianne, right?
No.
And I'm sorry for that because it's one of the things I love about her. It has very little value here. But the dynamic deeper than that is she still is by not demanding she be while she's here. All she ever did is showed up and said, I'll suffer with you. And so we get to this place where we're ready to suffer with me. Let me just first say this. I got this picture from Marianne because she talks about, she's a little preoccupied with birth and wombs, if you haven't noticed. I
think that's really important. The whole birth.
Oh,
that's
you
the whole
bet.
thing is that the birth and the womb, the image of the symbolism of giving birth and the symbolism of the womb is very important, I think, in understanding the rebirth. So, Marianne, with your interest in birth and womb, did that play into your dealing with your own grief?
Definitely, but I do want to go to, because one of the things that happens for me with Lori is that when Lori speaks, I get like flashbacks of certain stories, right? Being the storyteller. And what just became so clear to me, Lori, and I have not made this connection until this moment, 3 months before I got married, my father died unexpectedly, tragically. And as we approached the wedding, there was a lot of talk about who was going to walk me down the aisle. And a lot of the advice I got was, you need to pick someone. You need to pick one of your uncles, your brother. You don't want people to feel uncomfortable. It's a wedding. It's celebration. And I really struggled with it. And I came to the decision of, I will walk with anyone in that room who spiritually wants to join me. There will not be a person by my side. That is the kind of room I wanted to open up. And when I approached the aisle and I was actually there alone, I was filled with so much like fear at first, like it felt so scary. And then, I don't know, like I looked around the church and like everybody marked the missing father, like with just tears rolling down their cheek. And it was so powerful, like they joined me. And I walked alone, and the whole wedding was this duality of what are you grieving, what are you celebrating? And the father-daughter dance also. There, I chose my uncle who lost his daughter when she was 4. She died. And we danced together. It was a grief dance. And we danced to The Shadow of Your Smile. The shadow was present, but the love and the celebration was so powerful. And it goes back to what you said earlier, Lori, which is grief is a reflection of life, of what you really make of life. And my wedding experience, what it helped me to recognize was that there are always people grieving. And especially at a wedding, people who have gotten divorced, people who don't have a partner, people who have lost someone that year. There are always grieving people among us that we can walk beside, like if we choose to, without making it like more than I'm here. Like the love is just a tremendous connector. So that I think we're walking down the aisle together, you and me, Lori. We're
Yes,
getting married
let
to
me-
a tug of
let me
heart
just go
project.
I want to go back to the womb, which is kind of where this aisle happens to be.
Yeah.
So Maddi, when I say about Marianne's preoccupation with the womb, I'm going to drag you down with her because you girls are. And I don't know if she's ever told you, one of the things I've done when I first started listening to your show is I had to be open enough for the discomfort I had at how comfortable you two are going there, right?
Yeah.
But
Right to it.
there's been great payback and wisdom in that, just in being comfortable in what's or being uncomfortable in truth, right?
Mhm.
And that's a tremendous source of wisdom. And I kind of agreed to do it because I trust the two of you. So what I have found is that, you know, to begin with, letting go is so foreign. So it is uncomfortable. That's okay. And isn't this why we have such a hard time accepting one another on earth? Because we have to let go of a little bit of something we like holding on to, usually to embrace other people or new ways.
Right.
Especially me. I don't like it, not one bit. And I do talk about it very openly because I want, it can sound harsh, but I want people to get used to talking like that because it's part of it. I don't like that at all. Tell me more. And just being open, because I do think that's how we begin to meet one another. And even though I sound horrible saying it, it's okay because I want people to be comfortable sounding horrible because this is awkward and messy, which is what Marianne and I have now been working on. So back to like the grief and letting go. Grief is like, it means that that previous life has run its course. That's why I'm in grief. It's over. There is still life. Obviously, you're here talking to me. I'm alive. I'm breathing. So what is this continuation if life as I knew it ran its course? It does call for a rebirth. And so what Marianne was able to do by saying, I'm just going to go to where Lori is, because I've had plenty of people that are like, oh, you just do this and this. Come join me, Lori. We'll get you better. But it wasn't. It needed somebody to climb into those messy, murky waters where I was and am. In losing Seth, Marianne did that. And I think she opened her eyes, took a look around and was like, my God, I'm in a womb with Lori. And what happened is she's in a womb with me whose waters have just broken because I can't stay there. So she's been able to make this magical transcendence from that begins in grief, in labor pains, and be birthed into the new life. We're not there. But now we're kind of, she's an addition to who I count among twin souls with me because we've shared this womb. I know. And Maddi, we'll get to you after, Marianne, because I'd invited Maddi. And that comes from responding to that, again, tug of heart that I had said you recognize too, Maddi. It begins very mystically and we can't explain it. We respond and then we're like, wait, what have I done? And yet, now here's 3. It went from a single to twins to what? Triplets? Let's see. Let's do our time and our work and let's see. But I feel like this is how communities begin establishing.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
It's by doing this. And this is one thing. I have zero interest. I don't care which side you're on, the good side, the bad side. I am not interested in the modern politics. I want to clarify that. But what I will say is that I think when there is like just the most horrific events, there is this opportunity for us all to stand around it and make this choice of now what do we do? Reality has changed. A death has occurred quite often that piques our view of what reality we're existing in. And then we have the choice to change reality. but not just change it to make it new because it's not working. And we do that by going back to what we know, seeing our storytellers, our memory, because there is, and saying we don't start alone. There's been messages left for us for people who've worked this out for ages. We're not alone already.
Yep.
And part of, for me, what's come of that is understanding the soul and my own faculties, wisdom, which I leave to you guys because I acknowledge that it's not my particular vocation. I love it. I kind of wish I was. And you know, like, joking aside, we all must have some interest in it. At least the interest that we're willing to apply enough wisdom to our life to direct ourselves properly.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that in talking to, I asked my cousin Jossie to post in the Women's Oneness Project this morning a piece she wrote about overcoming, and she's dealing with a major illness, and she's a wonderful person, but her piece that she wrote about being happy with who she is now through all the transitions that have gone along with this. I just found everyday wisdom. This is, you know, it doesn't always have to come from, you know, a famous author or a philosopher or, you know, it often comes from art and poetry. Yes. And you know, fiction and music is often found at its most spiritual level in there. But as far as the spoken or the written word, somebody's story, like you just said, always has a great deal of wisdom in it. And I specifically asked her to post it thinking about today's podcast because this is me, this is you, this is Marianne, this is all of us. This is everyday wisdom that somebody has decided to express in a way that we can all relate to. And that's part of the mission of this podcast, is to, yes, introduce, you know, universal wisdom that we find all over the place, but also to really listen to the everyday men and women who are going through everyday experiences. And like you said, Laurie, the one we all know we are all going to go through is loss. And eventually we're going to lose our own life, and we are all going to face some loss through death. So in talking to each other and relating to each other about these losses and regaining, that's what a lot of people, I feel nowadays with COVID and all that's going on in the world, need to be reminded of, is you do regain. Don't sink into that depression. And the only way to remind people of this is to allow everybody to tell their story and to listen.
So, Maddi, what do you think? Because I certainly heard a lot of wisdom coming out of Laurie, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is, like, for me, the piece of wisdom that I really heard and I'm going to take with me, because it's simple, Laurie, is grief holds the potential to crush you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Completely crush you, or help you to grow into a completely other life. Like,
right.
It's right there. There is a choice in how you want to relate to grief. Whether it is going to take you down this path of being and I, you know, when I was grieving my marriage, I longed to be like ground up like peppercorns, like just grind me into peppercorn. Like, just I want to be crushed, because I couldn't bear just what was actually being lost. But that the longing was different than what I actually chose. I longed to be crushed, but I chose to grow and be rebirthed really into a new existence. So that's one of the wisdoms I'm taking. How about you, Maddi? Did you hear like a piece of wisdom that just stood out for you? And that's,
oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mary.
That was it. Just how it's like every day, like you're saying, like wow, important.
Well, that's certainly I think the biggest lesson of grief for all of us is that there is that moment of being crushed. There is that. I know when my mother died and I was with you in Women's Circle, Marianne, and I just collapsed on the floor. It takes everything out of you, and then there is that rebuilding. I was very fortunate to be in community. And I think that to me is
we lost your sound, Maddi.
We lost my sound.
No, I've got it. It's just Marianne. Go ahead.
Froze. Okay. So Lori, where are you?
Audience.
Are you there?
So,
I'm here.
Am I frozen?
No, we can hear you. Our little community. We're good listeners, just we're not great at being heard.
Okay, we're all back. Are we all back?
Yes.
I think we're all back.
Yes.
But I think that presence of community that Lori talks about, for me, that combined with what you just mentioned is the greatest teaching of wisdoms from grief. All the wisdom traditions and our everyday wisdom. We need to be there for each other. And I love, Lori, when you said that Marianne's way of being with you was what you needed. And it's not that you're begrudging people the fact that they need to help you. I mean,
yeah, that's totally fine.
Right. And culturally, we're like that. We want you to get over it in 4 days,
I want you to feel better, right?
They
right,
a
to make
gazillion
ourselves
books
feel
tell us the easy steps. Follow.
Right, exactly. And I think that when we have these discussions, and we're not the only ones, there's many, many people having these discussions, that we're moving closer to being more aware of what someone else needs when they're in that state of grief, of that quiet moment, not technical difficulties, but that quiet moment where we're just being with the person or listening to the person and then taking a breath before we speak or do. And that's great wisdom. So I think that brings us, Lori, I was just going to ask you, is there anything you want to close on? Because we're just about at the end. We got like a minute or two, but go. If there's something you want to add.
Basically, if I had to say it talking really hyper fast, I would say that you need to remember that we are made together by relation and cause, period. So we have to have something in common. And if you don't have something in common with something else, you can't be the cause of it. So when we see these tragedies today, we blame each other, but we don't have anything in common. You're never going to be the cause of their change, period.
Oh, I love that.
And grief has this potential to say, we hold this in common. Common means common unity. That's community. And this is what Marianne and I are involved with. I had much more to say, but we'll continue it maybe on our show.
Sure.
But by seeing the common unity in the most horrific tragedies of nowadays, just look at the news. You can see what is our common unity. And that means taking a sane look at what is happening in the world and saying, what do we do from here? How do we become healers and teachers by keeping something in common and let that death at least stand for a commonality that we decide to grow from?
Oh, we lost you there, Lori. Now you froze.
Because if not, you can't say yeah for both of us. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, we lost you for a second.
Just that last line.
Oh, but so what it has in common, and the sanity is really seeing it for what it is. What is in common about this? And that's where you get the common unity, and you have this potential to grow in a new way that you did not have before. Or another death happens and passes, and we blame and we wait for the next death, tragedy, but also opportunity. Which of these that's famous will we latch onto and build a community?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's the quickest way I can think.
Common unity. Come on, that's amazing.
Common unity, exactly. And so, listeners, that's what we'd like to challenge you to. If you are naming and blaming, and you're stuck in that anger for whatever reason it is, where can you find that common unity with the person you're blaming?
And common unity, I want to add, is in hope. Hope.
Mm-hmm.
And hope is talking about a future good. Okay. It's not focused on the tragedy, but a future good. And hope also means it's something we want, but at the same time expect, because we're ready to roll up our sleeves and move towards it.
Yeah.
Hope is not just a wish. That's called a wish for a reason.
Mhm.
I sound,
Exactly.
I'd like to end with a lecture usually. That's it.
You're ending on hope. Which
We're
is
ending on hope.
active.
That is
You're
right.
ending on active hope. Mhm.
Oh, I love that. Active hope. So listeners, be actively hopeful this week. And we will see you next week. Next week, our guest will be Jennifer Cormier, Rev Jen, as she's known, who is a death doula and who's going to talk with us about transformation, the wisdom of transformation. So I hope that you can join us for that. I love you both. So thank you, as always, Marianne. Thank you so much, Lori, for being with us for these last 2 weeks. And I love all of you out there too. Soak up some love and enjoy this beautiful day. Hopefully it's beautiful where you are also. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks, Bobby. Thanks, everybody at Strong Island Radio. Bye-bye now.